Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Welcome to Morning Shot. I'm Audrey Seek. Now, it's one of those things you hope never happens to you on a flight. You're relaxing, watching a movie, maybe you're napping, and somewhere mid-air, your valuables quietly disappear. As international travel ramps up, airports aren't the only places getting crowded again. There's a stealthier problem making headlines across Asia, and that's in-flight theft. From Hong Kong to Tokyo to Singapore, cases are emerging where passengers discover thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands of dollars worth of jewelry, cash, or electronics missing by the time they land. One jeweler even reported losing $120,000 worth of goods on a Singapore Airlines flight. So what's driving this sudden surge? Are certain routes more vulnerable? And how can you stay alert? To help us unpack the legal and operational sides of in-flight theft, we're joined by Dr. Alan Tan, who researches into and teaches aviation law at the National University of Singapore. Good morning, Professor Tan. Good to have you with us this morning.
Hi, good morning, Audrey.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Professor Tan, we know that in-flight theft has become quite a big concern for IATA to put on the agenda this year. Let's start with, why do you think we're seeing this rise in in-flight theft cases across the region? What do you think is driving this trend?
I think it's partly got to do with increased travel post-pandemic and opportunistic crime groups. So we don't exactly know for sure, but IATA, the Association of Airlines that you've talked about, has publicly said that they think that a lot of the crimes are coming out of travelers from Chinese routes out of China. And there is some suspicion among the experts that there could be organized crime involved. So there could be a variety of factors. There could be petty criminals as well being opportunistic. So it's a whole mishmash, if you like.
Okay, and talking about routes here, which are the routes to really look out for?
Again, it's hard to say which particular routes are prone. The media has identified routes out of China to be of particular concern, but I actually think that that's being too simplistic because opportunistic criminals can strike anywhere, and one should be careful on any route that one takes.
Yeah, so it seems to be pretty unpredictable these days. So what else makes this such a tricky problem to prevent or respond to?
Okay. So it's law enforcement and it's police enforcement against the criminals. So the issue has got to do with the fact that travel is international. And take a Singapore Airlines flight, for instance, flying out of Singapore. So Singapore law would apply to Singapore Airlines and Scoot flights because they are Singapore-registered aircraft. But you're flying out of Singapore. You're landing in Indonesia. You're landing in Australia, in Europe. So you're actually dependent on the receiving state, what we call the state of landing, to take action for their enforcement officials to come on board, take evidence from the witnesses, etc., and then proceed to prosecute. Now, that's not going to be guaranteed because if it's a petty theft and if the nationals involved, the perpetrator isn't their national, the victim isn't their national, they're likely just going to issue a warning, if at all, and then nothing happens. Singapore, therefore, the pilot would have to fly the perpetrator back to Singapore to face justice, and that's going to be a tricky issue.
Okay. So where jurisdiction is decided is also a pretty complicated situation. What happens if a theft happens in the air and it's only discovered after landing and then you're unable to catch that criminal? What do you do?
Yeah, there's effectively nothing you can do. Everything has dissipated. The criminal has dissipated. The witnesses have also disappeared. It's going to be even more difficult to get anyone.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's the other issue, of course, of foreign airlines flying into Singapore. Now, that, I think, we are at a better stage of things and developments because Singapore law actually prescribes for action to be taken by our police and our prosecutorial staff if the flight is incoming into Singapore, regardless of airline. So it can be a Singapore-registered aircraft or it can be a foreign-registered aircraft. As long as it lands in Singapore, something can be done. So really it depends on the passengers' luck. It has to depend on whether you're on Singapore-registered aircraft or on a foreign aircraft coming into Singapore or any other country that's prepared to take up action.
Okay. And we've seen theft cases involving some major losses recently, like that $120,000 incident aboard Singapore Airlines. Do you think current legal penalties are enough of a deterrent, or should we be looking at some tougher sentencing here?
Again, it depends from country to country. Speaking for Singapore alone, I think the punishments are sufficient. But in any event, we treat them as normal thieves, It's no different from somebody who steals, either from a jewelry shop, or you have to look at the value taken, you have to look at how stealthy the person was, how intentional, they were in trying to hide their actions. So I would think it's sufficient, but again, it really is key which country takes jurisdiction. And if it's a flight into Singapore, I think it should be all right. But again, there could be problem with witness accounts, whether the perpetrator was apprehended in time, all these practical concerns that actually we face even on the land-based crime.
Yeah, so it seems very dependent on the airline and the country. Are airlines already adapting, though? What kinds of security measures, like maybe onboard cameras or enhanced crew training, are they being looked at to address this issue?
I know some airlines are briefing their crew to be more vigilant, walking up and down. But, cabin crew already has so much work on their hands, ensuring safety and all that. It's really quite something else to expect them to be police officers enforcing vigilance on the plane. So I think that's actually way too much and excessive. Some installation of CCTVs on board might help. But I think at the end of the day, it's incumbent on each and every passenger to be more careful, to be more vigilant about their possessions.
Yeah, so tell us more about this, because as passengers, we often assume our bags are safe, once they're overhead. But with these recent cases, what should people realistically be alert to?
I think commonsensically, let's take, you and myself as passengers, right? If we don't have anything much of value, they can go on board and they can go on the overhead compartment. But if you've got something that you have that's valuable, and typically what would it be? It would be your passport, it'd be your cash, it'd be your cell phone, right? You keep them with you. You keep them under the seat, right? You keep them under the seat. The problem is that sometimes you've got a piece of baggage that's too big and cabin crew tells you it can't go under the seat, has to go into the overhead compartment. And you comply, right? So I try to go early and try to sit down and find the space right in front or up ahead of me. I sit on the aisle and I make sure that the bag goes, say, slightly across the aisle within my vision of sight.
Yep.
Right? And I guess if it's really important and it's valuable stuff, try not to go to sleep.
Don't sleep, yes.
Try to be vigilant. But, why would you carry something of such extreme value on board, right? Unless you're smuggling gold or something.
Unless you have to,
Yeah, all I'm saying is that if you've got all these small things like passports and cell phones with you, keep them with you, keep them in your pocket, keep them under the seat. That should be possible most of the time. Yeah,
and good luck if you're on that 20-hour flight direct to New York, Like if you can't sleep, it's going to be a pretty tough ride.
Right. So I'm not saying you can't sleep. I'm saying that if you're carrying something that valuable on board, then it's incumbent on you to be careful.
Yes, absolutely. So as a passenger, what are my rights if I am a victim of in-flight theft? What steps should someone take immediately, and what evidence, might be useful in a legal case?
Well, it's going to be very difficult because airlines typically compensate for personal injuries. If you've got property losses on board, they may or may not compensate, and you've got to also show that you yourself have not been negligent and you haven't caused the loss to yourself. So I would say that typically it's going to be difficult to get airlines to compensate for your losses, and if anything, they'd give you a token sum, and you're going to have to be pretty satisfied with that.
Yeah, something is better than nothing, I guess.
I guess so. That's
yes. Right. All right. So now that air travel is pretty much back to full strength post-COVID, do you expect in-flight theft to become more common? And what more should, airlines, regulators, or even the international bodies like IATA, what should they be doing to tackle the issue moving forward?
Right. So I do expect thefts to increase, because, as I mentioned earlier, there are opportunistic organized crime gangs out there. And I think the collaboration and close cooperation with the police forces of various countries will be exceptionally important so that you can nab these groups on land even before they check in or during the process of checking in. If you've got a database, Interpol gets involved, you know who they are, you nip the problem in the bud and you don't let them get on board in the first place. I think that kind of prevention is much more effective than having the theft happen and then worrying about it thereafter.
Yeah, well, I guess prevention is better than cure. And as the skies get busier, in-flight theft is emerging as a very real concern. From legal gray zones to passenger awareness, today's conversation reminds us that staying safe in the air takes a mix of vigilance, policy, and innovation. And that was Dr. Alan Tan, professor at NUS Law School, who researches into and teaches aviation law. Dr. Tan, thank you so much for joining us on The Breakfast Show.
My pleasure, Audrey.
Thank you very much. Stay with us on The Breakfast Show on Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.